Hi, I'm Regina from Atlanta,
And I'm Carrie from Oregon.
and we are Wine Sisters of the Vine.
Yes, we are. We're Sisters of the Vine.
How are you doing, my sister?
I'm doing great out here in Oregon. We're heading into a Memorial Day weekend, and we have a wonderful guest in the house, Miss Shae Frichette. Yay.
Hi, ladies.
Hello. We're so
Welcome.
excited to have you.
This will be fun. This will be a lot of fun. I'm excited
Yes,
to be here. Thank you.
yes.
Welcome. So, Regina, what you got in that glass over there?
So this is a little Imaginarium, Blanc de Blanc, all Chardonnay grapes coming out of the south of France. J.C. Boisset
Beautiful.
is the man behind the brand, and it is a lovely, beautiful, crisp, very dry, bubbly, with a really, really nice mousse on it. And I think it is a great little aperitif for this hot summer day in Georgia. It's actually still spring, but it feels like summer. The oven has gotten cranked up. So, cheers.
Cheers. So, tell us a little bit more about JC.
So JC is this like wild man who I had the pleasure of doing a virtual tasting with about a month ago. He has this amazing secret indulgence line, which Imaginarium is part of that line. He has something called Confession with this fantastic cab with this very ominous label on it. It looks like sin. It doesn't look like confession. And so on the back, you can write your 3 secret indulgences and have a little fun while you're drinking your wine. Yeah, and he has the Eveluna Chardonnay, which is also fantastic. A little bit of stainless steel fermentation with a little bit of oak. It makes it a great, great little Chardonnay, great food wine. Yeah. So JC has several wines. He's French in nature. And then he came to California on a visit to his grandmother's and had a ball. And so he has vineyards also in California and Napa. So yeah, he is, they call him the James Bond of wine. Yes,
Excellent.
yes.
Well, I bet he'd like to taste some of wines from Frichette too there
Oh, I'm absolutely sure he
in
would love
Washington
it.
State, don't you
Yes,
think? Yeah,
yes.
yeah. So, oh my
Absolutely.
gosh. Yeah, I think that we're so excited to see, and I'm sure just like JC was excited when he came to California and the West Coast in general and realized there's so many different wine regions on the West Coast.
Yes.
I,
And
as you know,
yes, and so Washington is
when
one
I
of
met in
my,
Lodi, I
yeah,
mean,
Lodi, yeah, that's how we met,
Lodi.
Lodi, yeah. So, and then Washington has just exploded in the last several years. I'm so anxious to hear more about your winery and how things work and the terroir and everything that you have going on because Washington State wines are really, they have really exploded. I haven't had as many distributors taste me on Washington wines as like in the last 3 years. So it's been amazing.
So
Yeah,
when
it's
did you
definitely.
start?
Okay.
When did you start, Shay? Do you want to share your story about when you started the winery, you and your husband?
Sure. We had a great life in Southern California, and we were talking about starting a family. My husband just says, you know what? Life is good. Let's do that now. And I said, okay. And he said, if we have a baby, we should move closer to our parents. And I thought that meant we were going to move closer to my parents in South Carolina. And he was suggesting we move closer to his parents in Tri-Cities, Washington. So obviously we were not on the same page. And anyways, after arguing about it, my husband just says, you know what? Let's leave it to fate. Let's flip a coin. If it lands on heads, we'll move to Washington. If it lands on tails, we'll move to South Carolina. And I was like 2 glasses of wine in. So I thought that was a brilliant idea. So anyways, he flipped the quarter and that sucker landed on heads for Washington State. So of course I said best out of 5. And my husband was just like, nope, we agreed wherever it landed, that's where we were moving. And I checked to see if it was a 2-headed coin and it wasn't. So I thought, the wine just kind of dissipated quickly because I just came back to reality. And I was just like, oh my gosh.
And it's
I
moving to
agreed
Washington
to, but
State.
right. But after sleeping on it for a little bit, I was just like, you know what, if we're going to leave Southern California and move to Washington State, let's do something that gives us goosebumps. And we loved wine. So we thought, you know what, let's quit our jobs and find a place in Washington and learn how to make wine. So we flipped that coin in 2012, I'm sorry, in 2010. And by 2011, we were making wine. We were making our first vintage of wine out of Washington State.
Wow.
Fantastic.
That is impressive. Wow. So you've made what, 8? How many vintages have you made?
Yeah. So 2011 was our first. So we're about 10 years in.
Fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So what are you growing? Tell us all about your wines.
Yeah. So when we got our property by knocking on doors because there was nothing for sale. So we just went door to door asking people to sell to us. And after 4 no's, the folks who own the 5.5 acre parcel we have finally said yes. So on this 5.5 acres, we have our house here, and then we have our tasting room, and we also have our production facility. So there's 3 facilities on the property: house, tasting room, production facility, which leaves just another, like 2.5 acres for wine grapes. So we grow 2/3 of our vineyard is Cabernet Franc, which is a varietal I absolutely love.
I love Cab Franc.
And then 1/3 is planted to clone 8 Cabernet Sauvignon. So we have those 2 varieties planted, but I work with about 10 different vineyards out here on Red Mountain. And most of these vineyards I can either walk to or hop on a quad and be there in just a minute or so. But we just have our little state vineyard, which actually produced for the first time last year. So it took us 3 years. So we get our first harvest in year 3. And year 3 was 2020. So that wine is in barrels, just kind of percolating until we get to bottle it in another 1.5 years.
Wow.
That's so cool. Cab Franc too. I'm excited.
I love Cab Franc.
Oh my God.
I absolutely love it.
Yeah, it's a variety. There's a lot of red wine varieties we grow really, really well in Washington, and Cabernet Franc is one of the varieties that shine. But it's not one that's a well-known variety. A lot of our winemakers still blend it in, and the consumer, it's easy to ask for like a red blend or Cab or Merlot or Syrah. Cab Franc isn't one that's like in crazy demand, but it's that variety that tends to really delightfully surprise guests as they visit the tasting room. So we actually have like a little Cab Franc following here.
Yeah.
And since there's not a lot of it planted on Red Mountain or in Washington, it's a little more challenging to source it to make 100% Cab Franc wine. We do a wine called Punctual that's mostly Cab Franc, but it has a little Cab Sauv in it. And probably about every other vintage we'll make a single varietal Cab Franc, 100% Cab Franc wine. But those Cab Franc followers can sniff it out. I mean, before we even release it, they're like, we know you got that Cab Franc coming. Where is it?
Where is it? Yes.
So you 80%, am I hearing right? 80% of your production is Cab Franc?
No, of our vineyard. 2/3 of our vineyard is planted to Cabernet Franc. No, so we produce, Cab is the most widely grown variety in the state. And I would say we produce a lot of Cab because we make for example, the 2018 vintage, we made 4 different Cabs from 4 different areas of Red Mountain. But I also make Merlot and Petit Verdot, Cab Franc. I make a fantastic Carmenere. We make Syrah. So we kind of dabble in all 6 of the Bordeaux varieties, plus, Rhone with Syrah. I guess you can say Croatia with Zinfandel. And then we make a Semillon, which is the only white wine we make, and then we make this rosé.
Oh yeah.
A single varietal Semillon.
What was that?
Single varietal Semillon.
Yeah, 100% Semillon.
Yes.
Yeah, it is delightful. I mean, we source it from a vineyard called Arts Vineyard, which is a beautiful site on the mountain. It's a smaller vineyard, but it overlooks the Yakima River, so it's small, but it's also picturesque. And so we buy, and they're pretty established vines that we get this Semillon from. But the way that we make it, we kind of push it through. It's fermenting in a cold room, so we get it through fermentation, and then we put it in neutral oak. And so it sits in neutral oak for about 8 months before we bottle it. So it has this like beautiful light toast flavor characteristic, and just from sitting in the barrel, it kind of gives it a heavier mouthfeel, but it's a very aromatic, and has like pear and apple, a little bit of citrus citrus notes we get on it. So it's just a really nice wine. It's not like as higher acid as some other wines that we could get if we were sourcing from other areas. But it's just it's a really nice wine with some weight and some good personality.
That is, oh my gosh, sounds delicious. Regina, I think this has to be on our, we got to be on our, has to be on our Wine Sisters tour this fall.
Absolutely, I think so. Sounds like it.
So let's, I'm curious, I've heard a little bit about that rosé that is made out of Merlot, and you have that label. Maybe you would share that with us, Shay?
Yeah, so I was thinking about like what I was going to put in my glass to have with you ladies. And normally, because I'm a rosé girl, and I mean, hence the color of my shirt today.
Imagine.
So I was like, it's a no-brainer that I'm going to just have this rosé. And I decided that, I go a little red instead of the rosé, because I'll have rosé like when we close tasting room.
Yeah.
But this label, I know this label is so dope. I hired a local artist to paint this for me. So I have the original painting here in the tasting room, but it's called Sashay. And this was I was inspired to do this when I attended this event called Celebration of Black Women in Wine. It was this really cool event in Miami. And I'd never seen another Black female winemaker. And so when I attended, I was just in awe and so inspired. And when I made the trip from Miami back to Tri-Cities, Washington, I was just like, you know what? I want to create a wine that is more of an expression of me. And I really wanted to craft a rosé. Rosé doesn't really fit into our Frichette portfolio, but I was just like, you know what? I'm going to call this Sashay, and Sashay can do what the heck she wants to do. So she is going to make a rosé. So Merlot is a variety that I really enjoy as the red wine variety. And so I was curious on what that might do for rosé. I love the strawberry, raspberry, rhubarb characteristics of it. And I thought that might show really well as a rosé. And I was right about that, because I love the way that variety shows up. When it really doesn't spend time on the skins, and you're crafting it as I'm picking it a little sooner than I would when I pick the Merlot for my red wines. Just want to maintain a little more acid on it. And I've just had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun making the rosé, especially for a label that's as sassy as this one.
How long does it macerate with the skins on them? How long do you?
Well, so the thing about it, I mean, if you look at the color, it looks like it just had like some really nice juice to skin contact, but that's not the case. I actually, so for this one, I crushing the stem, and I had 4 bins that I was crushing the stem in. And my crushing the stemmer takes it's probably maybe like a 3-minute turnaround. So it takes me 3 minutes to do it. I push that bin aside, I get the other one going. And that was as long as it took. That was as long as it had that contact, because then I put it in my press and I just pressed off right away. So if I were to guess like how long it probably had maybe 20 minutes.
Wow.
In contact, yeah. And this is the color that I got from it. So yeah, and I wasn't looking for, we sell about 99% of our wines out of our tasting room. And so there's a lot of things that we can kind of explain when it comes to the wines that we are sharing directly with the consumer. And so I wasn't looking for a particular like color that was in right now. You know what I mean? And so I just kind of was trying to do this more for like, what do I want from a flavor profile and a taste? Like, how do I want this to feel? What's the experience I want folks to have? And so I was way more concerned about, what this wine would do on the nose and the palate, versus trying to really focus on color. And then I
wish I had it here, because it looks amazing, and I can only imagine what the nose and the palate.
It's a beautiful, beautiful rosé. And you had mentioned the Blanc de Blanc you have is dry, and that's how I make this rosé. It's a bone dry rosé.
Yeah.
Well, that Merlot obviously produces, I mean, I'm intrigued by that color. I mean, clearly, yeah.
I am totally.
Beautiful,
It
really
is
unique,
really beautiful.
wrapped in that label, sachet, and the
Yes,
story.
that
Oh my,
pose is so fierce on the label. I love it.
Well, you should see the back. So the back of the label, it has a message to all women. It says, you are strong, you are courageous, you are fierce. You have the ability to create positive change in this world. So lift your chin, push your shoulders back, and sashay, girl, sashay.
woo,
And
we're
I
doing it.
love it.
I
That is
love
so
it.
awesome.
That is amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Isn't that the message we want to send every woman and every little girl?
Oh
Like,
my
Yes,
God,
it
you
is.
it
nailed it.
totally
It
is.
is. And I know sometimes that when we do things, it feels like that these messages are meant for little girls, but grown women, we need that too.
Oh
Like
no, yeah,
sometimes
the
we
women
find
we
our,
need to.
like sometimes it can, isn't it crazy? Like sometimes we have to, we wait until we're 40, 50, 60 before we find our confidence, before we realize that we are strong and that we are powerful in this world and we have way more influence than we can ever dream of. But it's so crazy because sometimes we're like, 40, 50, 60 before we really own that. And I just think that's such a shame.
Yes, it's so true. It's so true. And so the stories of other women, I don't care what age you are, it resonates from 12 to 100. I mean, it
Right,
doesn't matter
right,
the age of the person who's receiving the message.
right.
Absolutely.
I love that.
Thank you.
Well, and with child rearing too, you can't give them something that you don't own yourself. I mean, so wow. And your wines, I mean, reflect, I think, the fact that you have stepped into your own power
Hmm.
and that makes all the difference in the world when these wines are being made really from almost a spiritual perspective.
Hmm.
This is a journey of the heart, obviously,
Of
for
course, it is.
you and your husband.
It
So
is.
that's powerful in itself. And
It is.
authentic, that authentic approach is, I'm sure, carried you a long way. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
And the decision to leave your job to kind of do something that made your skirt fly up, I love it.
Right.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So wine, would you ever have thought growing up in South Carolina? Tell us a little bit about that. That you're sitting here owning you've been operating this winery for 10 years. And what would
Yeah.
that little girl in South Carolina say?
Well, I grew up in a dry house, so my parents did not allow alcohol in the home.
Oh,
So it's actually comical that I make and drink alcohol. I mean, it really, really is. So growing up in South Carolina in a small town, running outside barefoot was just as normal as eating. And I had a great childhood, just having that exposure to the earth. My family and we farmed as well. Not farming as a part of like that was the business we had, but farming as meaning it that we had a very large, I would call it like just an insanely large garden that we grew almost everything under the sun that we could grow in the Carolinas. Sweet potatoes, corn, lots of tomatoes, okra, cantaloupe, watermelon. I mean, you name it, we grew it, and it was so much fun just walking out to grab whatever I wanted for lunch. Like my lunch was literally in the garden. So I think that shaped my appreciation for agriculture, and wine grapes is just one piece of the agriculture makeup of this area. The
Mhm.
difference is that I get to take that product and then that raw material being the wine grapes and make it into something that people tend to really enjoy.
Yes.
that's beautiful. So the connection to the earth is very obvious, I think, in your winemaking style too. You bring in, I think that's one of the things that really, when I hear the story, the connection of the vineyard to the actual bottle of wine is so essential in, making people feel connected. Don't you think, Regina? That's what you do in your store all the time. You connect the vineyard and
Yeah, it's the whole story. And so the message that you have, not only about Sashay, It's more than that. It's like your whole story. I think people would be very much interested in how, you had this connection to the earth as a young child, that now you're still in your adult life, have that connection to the earth in a way that you're bringing this beautiful juice to people.
Hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. It's something about, for it's very windy here today, which is one of the benefits for our vines here because we get these thick skins and we all know the flavor and the tannin come from the skins. But normally, I'm out in the vineyard and getting the opportunity to just to reconnect. If it's just if there's nothing really to do in the vineyard, and it's just taking a walk, just being out in nature. And I'm reminded, every day, just because we live here, that we're using this product to make something special and unique here at Frichette. So it's a really cool experience. And, we definitely don't take it for granted. Sometimes my husband will be out on a walk and, it's very, in the mornings here, we have like, you'll hear in the background, maybe someone on a quad going from one vineyard to the next, but it's just pretty quiet. And my husband, he'll just go, oh my God, can you believe like we live here? Like we have a slice of Red Mountain, which is one of the most prestigious AVAs in the, on the globe. Like, can you believe that we get to wake up to this? And that's really special. And most of the time he's saying that it's when we are walking next to a vineyard or walking next to our garden.
Yeah.
Wow. I think that's going to intrigue people from all over the world because that little slice of paradise right there. I mean, you can't find it anywhere else but in Eastern Washington, I mean.
That's right.
So, in terms of growing in the vineyard, you have predominantly a Cabernet Franc, obviously, but you source from all of these other wonderful vineyards, as you mentioned, in your AVA Red Mountain, too.
Yeah, we do. So most of our fruit comes from other vineyards, and that's a treat in itself to get to work with these growers. Some of these growers have been growing wine grapes longer than I've been alive. So to have the opportunity to work with them and their fruit, it's just amazing. Because I mean, think about it. I have to have amazing fruit to make amazing wine.
It starts in the vineyard.
It does. It absolutely does. So that critical part of working very closely with my growers, it's just, that's another thing I don't take for granted. And I'm out in their vineyards a lot. I mean, they get what we look for, because we actually bring our growers in to taste through our wine barrels. And the reason we do that is so that they get what we are trying to do. Like they get our style, and they get how we are using the fruit to make the wine that we want to make. And so, we'll walk into their vineyard and they'll say, hey, Greg and Shae, this is what we're doing to the rows that you guys have contracted for. We're going to go through and green harvest, meaning they're clipping grapes and letting them fall to the ground because they want to get us more robust flavor characteristics in those clusters. Right. Because they know what we're looking for, and they've made that decision to crop that fruit in that way because they want to give us the result we're looking for. So the relationship we have with our growers is just, oh man, just invaluable.
Yeah, wow. And that's an added uniqueness too, that you have such close proximity to those growers too.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, they're your neighbors.
Yeah.
I love this picture of you guys all riding around on your quads. I used to ride my neighbor's quad when I was a little girl, and it is fun.
Yeah.
Everybody should ride a quad once in their life. So
oh yeah, it's a lot of fun.
We got to do that when you come out here, Regina.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to get on one. Make sure I can get off.
So so you're living this dream, and we're loving hearing about it. But tell me about your life before this in Southern California.
Well, I was in corporate training. I worked for Stanley Black & Decker, like one of the companies under that division, and I led the training and development for that division. So I had the opportunity to work with teams in Asia and Canada and South America who were in the US who were training teams on leadership development. So how to build high performing teams. So I designed the curriculum for that and facilitated that sort of stuff. So it was a blast. It was a lot of fun. And as a part of that, I was also an executive business coach, and that was fun. That was a new skill set that I picked up working for that organization, and I really, really enjoyed it.
Wow. That's really, I think a lot of that translates in just your presence here today. I can feel that. I'm sure a lot of that really impressive background translates to what you're doing today.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, especially, we're doing virtual wine experiences, and, for us, we take ours to a whole nother level. And it's because I used to design this stuff. And so, our virtual wine experiences have a lot of trivia in them. And we even do one where you get a mystery bottle of wine and we teach you how to blind taste, and then you guess what the varietal is.
Mm-hmm.
But it's super engaging and a lot of fun. But, I really didn't know that my past profession would make its way into what I currently do. I enjoyed it when I was working in training and development. And so, it was bittersweet to leave that, but it's such a blessing to be able to be a winemaker and own a winery, and also get to incorporate something that I was trained to do into my current career. So that's a blast for me.
Wow. I love it. I love it.
That's fantastic.
That is super fantastic. So tell me how you felt when you actually sold your first bottle of wine.
Well, the crazy thing is that we sold our wine before our wine was being sold before we were ready to sell it, and that was just a lot through like the relationships we had built. Someone asked, they knew my background, and asked me to MC a program. It was before we opened our. It was about a month before we opened our winery, and then he said, "Well, since you're going to MC, wouldn't it be cool if we had your wine?" I was like, "Well, I mean, I don't even know how to sell it. I don't have a system that can even take payment yet. I mean, that system be ready in like a week, but so it was very exciting because they weren't buying bottles, they were buying cases of wine from us. And so to have that large purchase be our first purchase, to give us also practice to work with this new point of sale system was really, really cool. It was so cool that I barely remember it, because it was such one of those things. It's almost like,
right,
when you wake up on Christmas and you get like that first time you got that big gift that you had asked for from your parents, because you never thought in your wildest dreams they were going to get it for you, but you're so just like shocked and overwhelmed and excited that it's just like you just you kind of you can feel it, but it's like that moment just went.
You had to pinch yourself.
What was that?
You had to pinch yourself.
I had to pinch myself. Yes. I had to pinch myself. So hopefully that kind of summed up what I felt, but it was really cool and unexpected and such a blessing.
Wow, that's huge. And now you do the majority of your and I love that story, by the way.
That's a great story. Yes.
I love that. And you do the majority of your selling now out of the tasting room, and you've been doing it for 10 years now. So you've learned a lot, I'm sure, in that 10-year period. But it sounds like you've really retained the passion too, which I think is obviously really integral for keeping a winery going, because it's an act of love.
Amen to that. Well, it is, and it's also I enjoy learning, and wine. It's just one of those things. I'm just like, gosh, when do you? Are you ever such an expert that you don't need to learn anything else? And I don't believe that to be true.
Yeah,
I feel like there's this whole world of wine.
Yeah.
And, even when I'm asked to do things like this, I come to the table just knowing that I can give you the story of what we do. I can have the conversation about how I do things here, how Greg does things here. But I don't come to the table as I know everything. But that's what keeps it very exciting for me. I was sharing that I was working with Merlot. I enjoyed it because I enjoyed Merlot when it's made into the red wine, but I was intrigued, so I made it into the rosé. That was a learning for me. I started making red wine first before I was making rosé. Yeah. And with this rosé is even different from the one that I made last time. This it's drier, it's lighter. But that was a learning on how to make this wine in the way that I'd like to make that wine and what I need to do to get it that way. And so that's where the passion for me, lies, it's in knowing that I get to continuously learn and grow in this industry and with this career.
Well, and that's amazing too. And I think you're right that we never quit learning. That's why Regina and I kept doing, are doing what we're doing, because we there's always something new to learn.
Absolutely. Every single day.
Every day. And so, with that being said too, there's another favorite subject of ours too, which is food and wine combined. So
I'm there with you.
Right? And especially as it gets closer to dinner. I guess Regina's already passed us with that department.
Well, I haven't had dinner yet because I rushed home. So
Right. For your second job.
Yes.
So what would you say are some of the Frichette Winery pairings, like classic pairings? I know Regina does these amazing charcuterie boards in Atlanta. What do you do there at Frichette for your food pairings with your cab and all that your wonderful varietals, Merlot and...
Well, one of my favorite food pairings is a Moroccan spice lamb stew with our Malbec. And I actually have that recipe on our website because I love it so much. And I've kind of modified it to make it something that I enjoy. Like the dried fruit that I put in it can change. Like I have an apricot tree. So when those are ready, I'll switch out the dried cranberries for apricots. But I love the spice in it, like just the Moroccan spices with the spice that you get in our Malbec. So our Malbec is more fruit driven and those spices are kind of like undertones. But when you pair it with something, it complements so well that it brings out more of the spice in the Malbec. So I have to say that on a day that I feel like cooking, that's probably a great pairing. And then the Merlot, which you mentioned, I make, because I told you I'm from the South. I'm from South Carolina. So mac and cheese is one of my favorite dishes. And so I make an amazing smoked Gouda and rosemary mac and cheese. And this is going to surprise a lot of folks because if I were to really think about mac and cheese, I would think that I need like a Chardonnay or something like that to pair with it. But the Merlot is such an amazing pairing with that. The smokiness from the Gouda brings out the smoke that you get from the charred oak barrels for that we put the Merlot in. The rosemary, there's a little bit of herbaceousness in the Merlot that can be overlooked if you're just kind of drinking that Merlot, but that rosemary in that mac and cheese brings that out. So that would be my favorite pairing with the Merlot.
So is that a recipe that you can share? Because I am a mac and cheese fanatic.
Yeah, so I put that recipe on our website as well.
Okay, because I'm going to go get it. I love rosemary.
Well, rosemary is my favorite herb, but I have to tell you now, I overdo it because I also love cheese, and so for some folks they may not love cheese as much as me. So for that recipe, I overdo it, but because it's so deliciously cheesy.
You can't get cheesy enough for me.
Right.
It's making me hungry.
It's making me hungry. I totally what do I have in the pantry?
Yeah. The mac and cheese, it's the recipe is very simple. It's so easy to make. But it's the way that it tastes seems like it takes all day and it's so many ingredients, but the recipe that I have is just very simple and it pairs very well with the Merlot. I'm sure it would pair well with other red wines too, but my favorite pairing is with the Merlot.
That is beautiful. And so the rosé might be your appetizer. You would do maybe rosé could be a nice appetizer wine too, right?
Yeah. So we just not gonna go straight into the red and the mac and cheese. We gotta have something to enjoy while we're making the mac and cheese.
That's right.
Yeah. Where the rosé comes in.
Yeah. So and with all those different wonderful sorts of fruits, you're living in one of the premier fruit producing regions in the world. So I can only imagine the wonderful rosé pairings, the cheese and the fruit pairings that you could produce. And your charcuterie boards probably are insane. Because how many?
Oh God, yeah. I would love to have some of that here.
Yeah. What do we have? What is peach? I couldn't even begin to list everything that is right surrounding you right there. It's
peaches, nectarines, apples, all kind of varieties of apples. And then, I mean, we're talking like in super close proximity. Like as I'm sitting here, although I'm on Red Mountain, I can look to my right and to my left and in front of me to see vineyards, but sitting a little bit higher over the vineyards is a massive apple orchard. But fresh berries as well, blueberries, raspberries, blackberries. I mean, like you name it. We don't grow oranges. I haven't seen oranges here, but yeah, it's an agriculture mecca here.
Awesome.
Wow. And yeah, and that reflects itself in your wine too, with your terroir. I mean, this is like Eden. I mean, you've got these growing seasons there's an intensity to them, and then you have the longer winter, but your growing seasons definitely are there is more of an intensity than there is in Oregon, with our cool climate growing. So it's so fascinating how close we are, and as you mentioned also, the AVAs that's surrounding you there's a distinct uniqueness with each of those AVAs, and it's quite startling. And people think, oh, you're in Washington, so you must be like Seattle, but tell us the fact.
It's so much
far from the truth. Yeah,
it literally, I mean, it really is night and day. Seattle is plush and green, and they get lots of moisture. And where I am on the eastern side of the state, it's very dry and very desert-like. In fact, on Red Mountain, we get about 6 to 7 inches of rain a year. A lot of years we were getting about 5 inches. Yeah, so we drip irrigate. We pull water from for our area, we're pulling water from the Yakima River, which is into the mighty Columbia River. But without that water source, we wouldn't be able to do the things we do from an agricultural standpoint. So it's a very important resource we have in the area. But night and day, Eastern and Western Washington, just 2 different areas.
Yeah. Sounds like.
Yeah. Well, we're definitely Willamette Valley down here in Oregon too. I mean, there's definitely that connection to the Willamette River, and we're all very lucky from that standpoint too. So yeah, and environmentally too, I'm sure your vineyard practices reflect the fact that you have this reverence for the earth and for the rivers and the water and all of those things too. So that's nice. That's a nice story, that kind of that connection to preserving the earth. So any other wines that you really want to share with us today, Shae,
Well, I mentioned, so we talked the Sashay Rose. You had mentioned Cabs and Merlot. The wine that I would say that I'm very excited about in our portfolio is our Carmenere. Carmenere is not a variety that's talked about a whole lot in the U.S. And you don't really see a whole lot of it coming out of Washington. It's not a variety that's widely grown, but when you're growing it, it just grows insanely well. So for what we find in our area, the Carmenere can have a spice to it that can be white pepper or habanero or jalapeno. I mean, like it can just spicy pepper, and I think that characteristic really sets it apart from anything else we grow here. And so you get that from it, but being that I get that fruit from Red Mountain, you also get just amazing fruit driven characteristics in the wine. And so it's just kind of like that perfect hidden gem that we have. Only a couple of vineyards grow it out here on the mountain, and so it's not a variety that is super easy to get, but we're just very thankful that we get the opportunity to make it. We treat it just like we do our other wines. It sits in about 50% brand new French oak and 50% once used French oak. And we age that for anywhere from 18 to 24 months. And so we just give it enough of a life in wood to just kind of round it out a little bit, give it some of those subtle wood characteristics, a little bit of vanilla, a little bit of baking spice, a little bit of marshmallow, a little bit of smoke, some of those sort of things before we put it into bottle. But it's a rock star wine. And my favorite types of, although I'm from the South and I do cook a lot of Southern food, I actually grow my own collard greens, but I cook a lot of Southern foods. I love Mexican cuisine. I love Indian. I love Moroccan. And Carmenere just has that spice that can really marry well with those types of dishes. So I would say Carmenere is one that I love to make sure that I get in there.
Oh, that's neat. So
Because you
and
don't think Carmenere when you think Chilean, right?
Exactly,
Chile. Yeah,
exactly.
so you're thinking
Right.
Chile. Yeah. So I am very anxious to get all of these wines in my house.
Yeah.
And try
But I
them
would
next
say if you ever
year.
see a Washington Carmenere, it's worth nabbing. So some producers, Bartholomew here, Cooper produces a beautiful Carmenere. Anna is one of my other favorite producers of Carmenere, and of course, Nab Frichette, if you see it, because it last vintage we had it for 4 months only before it was completely gone. And most people don't even know we have a Carmenere because it was gone just that fast. So
Hmm.
Washington Farms are absolutely amazing. I would say if you see it, nab it.
Yeah.
wow. I
And can people order your wines from your website?
Yes, they can. But you know, the crazy thing, Regina, when you said you're from Georgia, I'm like, I love Georgia, but I don't ship to Georgia.
You know what?
I don't ship to Georgia.
Oh, dang it.
I know, I know. So Oregon, absolutely, all day long. We ship to
Oh,
about
I'm gonna get
50.
some shipped to Carrie's house, so when I go to
Please.
her house, I can pick up my wines from her.
I
Is
know.
that
Well, if you
okay?
know anyone in North Carolina, so we do ship to North Carolina and Florida, Colorado, and there's like about 15 states we ship to. But yeah, I would invite anyone to check out our site and just see what we have. We do a lot of, I call it edutainment,
Hmm.
because I think wine's fun and it has
It
so
is fun.
much exploration. And so I mean, it's just there's so much adventure and so much opportunity, but it can seem super intimidating. And I think ordering from Frichette, I mean, we have notes on our wines and we have videos and we do a lot of Instagram stuff where we are in our vineyard and showcasing how we make the wine. And so I just, I'd love to invite people if you are still curious about wines like Carmenere, if you've never tried it before. Um, give it a try. Pair it with the food that complements with it, and just be prepared to be blown away.
So, yeah, I was just thinking. I got a little thinking cap on. Um, I'm due for, I'm coming to Oregon. I'm going to Oregon in September. I'm trying to figure out when I can go to Washington State and maybe, um,
Wrap it up with your Oregon trip. We're just, we're right next door
yeah,
to Oregon, and we'll be in harvest in September, which is also a fun time to visit because our wine grapes are coming in. It's where
you
it's
guys will be busy though.
Well, you know what? Come and help me.
I'll come work your harvest. I've done harvest before. I can do
To
it.
do some punch downs. We have a high pressure washer to clean the bins after we get the wine grapes into the crusher December. So,
Yeah,
so we're busy, but it's one of the most exciting times to visit wine country because, harvest is exciting. The fruit's
it
coming
is.
in, and it's one of the best times to visit because you really get to experience um, the clusters going from cluster actually to going into wine, and to be a part of that process and get to see it. I think can change the way people even think about wine, to
Yeah,
experience harvest and to
yeah,
just pop into a winery and see what they're doing.
yeah.
I think that sounds like Wine Sisters road trip in our second part 2 episode of Frichette Winery.
Sounds like it. I
I
Uh,
think we
think you
should
should
do.
do
I
the
think we
episode
should be
from
there.
Frichette Winery.
I love it.
Cool.
I don't want this conversation to end. I am totally fascinated. I just love to hear about, as much as I love our
There's
flagship
definitely a part two to this.
Pinot Noir, I really feel like there is a whole part 2.
Hmm.
And that part 2, I think, even needs to be on site as we are reopening and so excited to actually, you
Hmm.
know, see people in
To
person.
Right.
see people, yes. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad to see people.
Yeah,
Oh yeah. Same
yeah.
here.
Yeah, and there's a sensory experience with wine, because we when when I judge wines, like you were saying, you judge wines blindly. You rely on those senses. You close your eyes and you think about how it tastes. There's a textural component to that, and I think the same applies also. There's a social element that when we're actually in each other's company, it heightens the senses, and the wine gets better. You
Yeah,
know, uh,
agreed.
yeah, it's much more fun than drinking alone.
Okay. Not opposed.
I agree.
But, and speaking of, this has been another delightful episode of Wine Sisters, and I hate to, it's hard for me to go away.
I know we're like the gnat.
I know. I'm loving this discussion with you guys.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's
But there will be
definitely
a part
it's definitely
2.
fun. Yeah. Well, I hope it'll be exciting to be a part of part 2. I think that, talking wine can go on because you kind of start the conversation around the wine, but then, wine brings about just the opportunity for humans to connect, whether it's virtual or in person. And so, you find yourself, with a good glass of wine and getting into great conversation, and you can
Mm-hmm.
go a lot of different places with it. So I look forward to part 2 where I can really clink glasses with you and cheers to you in person.
Cheers.
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 Cheers, you
I
guys.
love it. Yes.
Right. Well, this has been another wonderful episode with our fabulous guest, Shae Frichette.
And thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure.
Thank you so much for sharing your time. And as always, my wine sister, thank you for sharing your time.
My pleasure.
All right. Here we go. This has been another wonderful episode of Wine Sisters. Cheers for Change. Signing out, Carrie from Oregon.
And Regina from Atlanta.
Good night, everybody.